it's some of the best music. We're now going to do the Teafaeri's Guide to Holding Space. She's the best. I'm so happy that she wrote this for me. In this presentation, we are going to explore the many ways that a dedicated support person can help facilitate safe, positive, meaningful, and memorable experiences for small groups of healthy and responsible adults. We're going to talk about some of the many reasons that people may choose to take psychedelics and pathogens, entheogens outside of a clinical context. We're also going to go over planning and preparation, review some basic safety protocols, suggest delightful activities, and discuss strategies for navigating common challenges. As these substances continue to make their way into the mainstream, it is the goal of NEST and the Teafaeri to educate as many people as possible about the best practices in general, and specifically about the important role that a dedicated support person can play in maximizing the astonishing benefits that psychedelic substances can offer to healthy people, as well as reducing many of the potential harms that may result from the irresponsible use of these powerful and fascinating tools. It is our belief that a vast majority of the kind of psychedelic mishaps that have damaged the reputation of these miraculous substances in the eyes of the general public, law enforcement, and emergency personnel could have been averted if a sober and responsible caretaker had been part of the game plan. So let's get into it. Why do we alter our consciousness? Humans have been altering their consciousness at least as long as there have been humans. We do it in a wide variety of ways and for all sorts of reasons. Meditation, sex, and exercise can alter our consciousness by encouraging our bodies to produce endogenous hormones and neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, and norepinephrine. Little kids often spin around just to get themselves dizzy. People drink and smoke and take narcotics, stimulants, and pharmaceutical drugs to change the way they feel in their bodies and to alter the way that they think. People take drugs to help them lower their anxiety, to focus, to loosen up, or to stay awake. Or sometimes because they like the way it feels to be high. Certain classes of drugs, which include psychedelics and pathogens, entheogens, and dissociatives, can have radically transformative effects on human consciousness. In addition to changing the way that they feel in their bodies, these substances can alter people's perception of the world around them, adjust the way that they process thoughts and emotions. The human mind is astonishingly complex and subtly, or in some cases not so subtly, adjusting its settings can produce a truly astonishing variety of emergent states that turns deeply fascinating, wildly terrifying, profoundly moving, enormously amusing, unspeakably confusing, and therapeutically useful. It has been recently shown that when used properly, not only many of these substances can help ease the symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and a host of other common mental health issues, but they can address the underlying causes and mechanisms of these disorders, leading to a true and lasting recovery. What has been known for a long time is that taking these substances can catalyze philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual insights, facilitate interpersonal bonding, and also can be a whole lot of fun. Messing around with your mind can also be a little dangerous though, especially for people with underlying mental health conditions. It's also a little bit sketchy to take any drug that alters your perception, abilities, and judgment in an uncontrolled environment, and it's good to have someone around to take care of your physical needs and to generally help to ensure that events proceed smoothly whenever your mind isn't functioning in the way that you're used to. Which is why there are trained facilitators that specialize in taking care of people who are in altered states of consciousness. Here are some different types of facilitators. Psychedelic experiences can take place in a wide variety of contexts, and the kind of support that a voyager may need can vary quite a bit depending on the setting, set, and the number of participants involved, the dose, and the reason that they're choosing to take psychedelic drugs in the first place. Altered states facilitators include professional therapists who are trained to help an individual client explore their psyche, process their trauma, or work on deep personal issues. Ceremonial leaders who are often, but not always, well-trained practitioners in a lineage-based medicine tradition and preside over ceremonies of various sizes that are often focalized around healing. And peer support workers and volunteers who help ground and comfort recreational psychedelic users who are having unexpectedly intense experiences at festivals and events. And so we're facilitators who watch over individuals and groups who are engaging in intentional, open-ended psychedelic exploration in informal and non-clinical settings. So this is kind of the last one that we're going to talk about, right? Because some of us might be underground practitioners or therapists, but like we're really going to go into like how we're going to hold space as friends. So there are some ways in which all of these roles are kind of similar, but there's also some very important differences that are worth going into. Because in many ways, the role of a dedicated psychedelic facilitator is defined by what it's not. It's true that all of these occupations could be classified under the broad category of altered states facilitators. But they each have a unique scope of practice. They're trained in different ways, and they have different responsibilities. Even if you happen to be a bona fide Aboriginal shaman with a license to practice psychedelic therapy and a perverse desire for pitching in at the Spunnion tent on weekends because you simply not get enough, it's really important to remember that these are all separate endeavors. There are power dynamics and consent issues involved, but we'll get back into those in greater detail later. But broadly speaking, a licensed therapist has a lot of intense training in very specific modalities for processing trauma, and it is a relationship of trust that is consensually entered into by a person when they are sober. Practicing therapy without a license is illegal, and if you do happen to have a license, then it should be made especially clear to anybody that you are simply trip sitting for them, and that you're not there in your professional capacity. Which doesn't mean that traumas never surface, or that you should suddenly pretend to forget everything you know about how to help someone safely process whatever is coming up for them. Likewise, a sitter is not a synonym for shaman. Ceremonial leaders, likewise, one should hope at any rate, are people who have a lot of intensive training. All good psychedelic support people endeavor to create a safe container. And everyone aside from peer support workers may sometimes take charge of handling the distribution of medicine. Only ceremonial leaders position themselves as intermediaries. A dedicated facilitator does not get to profess to have any unusual powers, even if they truly believe that they do. And they do not get to attempt to heal anybody or to negotiate with any elements of the spirit realm on their client's behalf. I guess that if anybody in your party starts having a really rough time, it's okay to go ahead and bring your peer support training to bear. But the consent and responsibility situation may still be a bit different depending on what kind of agreements a dedicated facilitator has entered into with their adventure party. For instance, if your guest at the trip tent decides that they've had quite enough of your face, then they are welcome to leave so long that they're not in imminent danger to themselves. But if everyone that you are facilitating for has agreed that they will not, for instance, leave your house, then you're gonna have to negotiate with anyone who decides that it's time to take a walk down to the river. So there are lots of terms for a psychedelic support person. So there are a lot of other words that are sort of synonyms for a dedicated psychedelic support person, which is admittedly a mouthful. A lot of people simply call themselves a sitter, which may be a little bit infantilizing. Though trippers and toddlers do have a lot in common. So let's see, some people use the term ground control. Okay, you're like, go for launch, right? We're like sitting back at the NASA space station. Or hey, Major Tom, are you still in there? Like, where are you at? We can check in with you. Like a wingman is similar. Some people say guide, but that again is essentially, these are essentially self-guided explorations. So you're more like their buddy or like their Sherpa, you know the territory more or less, and you can manage their gear for them. Rather than just flipping back and forth for the purposes of this presentation, we are going to use the term facilitator because I like the etymology. A facilitator is someone who makes everything easier. Facile means easy in French. It really is an art form to make everything feel easy. To be easy to work with and easy to play with, to be easy to talk to and like to put all of the energy at ease. To really make people feel comfortable, you first have to be comfortable within yourself. It is a truism that trippers are telepaths, and anxiety and discomfort are extremely contagious. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can put yourself, and by extension, your charges, at ease before a session begins. Negotiate the plan beforehand. So substances, experience, and safety. One of the most important ways to put your mind at ease is, of course, to familiarize yourself with the game plan well in advance. And study up on any substances that you do not already have extensive knowledge about. If there is more than one substance on the menu, be sure to research their typical interactions as well. You should also take the opportunity to get to know each of the participants at least well enough to satisfy yourself that they are indeed rated for the proposed expedition. This is, of course, much easier if you are just facilitating for your close friends. But even in that case, you can't afford to make any assumptions. You should try to speak to each participant individually, or at very least provide them with an easy way to send you information privately. Find out roughly how much psychedelic experience everyone has. Don't be shy to ask them in a friendly and non-judgmental way about what medications, supplements, or recreational drugs they take regularly. It is 100% okay to speak up if you think that something is potentially a risky proposition. It is your explicit duty to do so, in fact. And you should never agree to facilitate a session if you are not generally confident that it will be safe and manageable experience for all concerned. If some aspect of the initial proposal sounds a bit questionable, then you should feel free to question it. Opening a friendly dialogue may be an opportunity to educate your friends, and they might well be very willing to accept your advice. If, for instance, that you think the proposed dosages are just a little bit too high, or that they ought to wait a little bit longer than they planned before ingesting a booster. And so when I am working, these recreational private parties that I work, there's definitely if everybody takes MDMA, and then it's like 45 minutes in and people are like, is there more MDMA someplace? I'll be like, oh yeah, let me go check on that, I'll be right back. And then like disappear for 20 minutes. And I'll come back at like an hour and 10 minutes and be like, how are you guys feeling now? And they're like, oh, thank God we waited because we weren't feeling anything, right? And so knowing how to stretch out time, knowing how to, like, if everybody's kind of in a snuggle hangout pit, knowing how to like take the plate of ketamine away and like put it up on a shelf. So if somebody wants more ketamine, they have to get sober enough to be able to walk to where the plate is and bring it back to them. But like knowing how to like, negotiate things. I actually, in one of my intention decks, there was a plate of ketamine at a party, and I put the card, it's not a competition, just on the plate, just to remind people that like what your dose is and what your dose is and what my dose is different, and we're not here to compete of who could do more drugs. We're here to have like a safe and memorable time. So there are some preparatory agreements. Ground rules. Substances, consent, how many people are playing, location, phones, we'll go into phones in a second, recording, and emergency contact plan. So next it's time to make a few simple agreements. It's important to get a clear affirmative buy-in from every participant on a number of basic ground rules. Some people feel more comfortable getting these things down in writing, and others prefer to make a casual pact. Don't just hand wave it though, because if it becomes necessary to remind someone, for instance, that we all decided that we would remain on the property for the duration of the trip, it sometimes helps if the scene in which they consented to abide by that agreement contains a moment that can be clearly brought to mind. Remember, we all shook hands on this. We agreed to not leave this space. Like, you remember when we shook hands, like right before we like turned the music on, like right, bringing an instance of like, we did this action. Remember when we agreed to this? People will be like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. Okay, cool, like I'll get back on board, right? And so having a period of time where you make like sober agreements and have it be like ritualized can really help keep the container safe. Agreements help put everyone at ease, and witnessing their friendly enforcement is often very reassuring, even to the ones who might have temporarily forgotten the rules or suddenly switched up their objectives. Some useful agreements that you might want to make with your party are practical ones, like remaining within the target area until a certain amount of time has elapsed, or until you've cleared them for travel. Most of them revolve around consent, though, like an agreement that any emergent proposition, like a group excursion to the park, radical alteration in the soundscape, changing the music, or a visitation from an unexpected friend can be unilaterally nixed by anyone who isn't into it without a need to defend their issues, right? So if somebody's like, oh, like my boyfriend like just texted me and he like wants to come in, and somebody's like, I don't know your boyfriend, I don't want him in here while I'm in an altered space, we all agree that we're playing by the same ground rules. Anybody can say, hey, I need to change the soundscape, hey, like do some suggestions around that, because we've all made these agreements to play together. It should go without saying that this also goes for turning down any sort of unwanted touch, along with a general prohibition on violence. But let's just go ahead and say it anyways. Like, while we're under this experience, we're not going to engage in any violence or unwanted touch. You might also, and I've been in situations where there have been people who are in extreme high state, like extreme altered states, and they start punching a wall or they start hitting their head against something. And it's like, sometimes if you need to hit your head against something, like I can hold a pillow there so you don't hurt your head. You can still hit your head, right? Like, how do we make it safer for everyone? And so, right, no, don't punch a wall, like punch a pillow. If you need to, like, if you have that somatic release, there's a lot of times where, especially with MDMA and in clinical trials, we get energy like somatically stuck in our bodies. And sometimes, there's not a small enough pillow in here. Sometimes, if you're working with somebody, having a pillow and pushing it back and forth because they want to push against something, right? Like that movement is a movement that is like energy releasing, but you need to be able to do that against something that is safe and soft. And so making sure that you have the right tools, and that if there is like some somatic shaking or some like energy that needs to move, that they have a space to do that in. You might also want to make some agreements about personal telephones, and whether or not it's okay for the participants to record the proceedings. Do you want to be allowed to call your parents if you decide to? Or should we just like put all of our phones away until tomorrow morning and we'll like get to that later? The number of times at music festivals where I have been like, it's 3 in the morning, like you're not gonna call your parents right now. Your parents are going to freak out if you call them right now. Things that I have done in the past have been, what do you want to say to them? I'll write it down. And we can call them in the morning. Like, they're asleep. You don't want to wake them up. I had a friend at an ayahuasca ceremony who wanted to call his 12-year-old daughter at 3 in the morning to tell her that she's not allowed to watch television anymore because television is like toxic to her. And it was like, no, like you're not going to call your daughter at 3, your 12-year-old daughter at 3 in the morning to tell her that she's not allowed to watch television anymore. Like, that is not. But he called his sister was watching, and his sister was like, I'm not waking her up for, like, I'm not, no. But maybe it's a good idea to just like take phones off the table, right? And so if everyone is provisionally down with creating a audio or video record, it might well make the whole process much easier if you volunteer to take charge of any recording equipment that is to be used. This is the best way to ensure that it will be used correctly and unobtrusively, and that copies can either be uniformly distributed or thoroughly deleted if anyone registers a post facto objection to their continued existence. In psychedelic communities, I have found like things get really confusing. People can't remember what they said. Sometimes, like an audio recorder, put on a table to be like, wait, what did we just say? And we can go back and listen to like, did you say that or did I? Like, who came up with this idea? And I know psychonautic communities that record everything, like that audio record everything, because they want to be able to reference the tape again, because they get these big, profound insights, and then the next morning they can't remember them. They want to go back through and listen to the tape. And so if everybody is consenting to having a recorder, then you can record the session. And if somebody's like, yikes, I don't want that anywhere, then we can delete it. But like people with their own phones in pockets, recording certain things, taking pictures of certain things, taking pictures of people, like, So, if your party is planning on going large, you may also want to collect some emergency phone numbers and discuss the conditions under which you might call in reinforcements up to and including emergency personnel if things were to get really out of hand, which they totally shouldn't and almost never will. But not making a plan is a temptation for trickster energy, and if you don't have a plan, that's the one time it's going to happen. I bring my big fur coat to Burning Man every year and never wear it. And I know the one year that I don't bring my fur coat, it's gonna be freezing cold at night, but like I bring it anyway because I know that if I don't bring it, like it's gonna be cold. And so you should try to get a good sense of the general intentions behind any trip that you decide to facilitate, and then help the participants choose an appropriate venue and a conducive start time. This will this be a mostly outdoor in the daytime sort of trip? Or is this more of like an indoor nighttime vibe? Generally speaking, it's always good. It's good to always have a secure, private base of operations. If your crew is planning to venture out in public or spend an extended time in nature, you should familiarize yourself with the target areas and plan for contingencies. Know where the nearest bathrooms are. That is so helpful if you are like out, if you decide to like trip at a beach someplace, and then all of this, like you as the ground control sober person should be like, I know exactly where the bathrooms are at this spot on the beach. Know where the nearest bathrooms are, for instance. What if there is, in case an abrupt change of direction, and you have to make a getaway quickly to someplace more sheltered or more private? What if somebody starts having like big vocalizations and you're drawing the attention of strangers? So, make a checklist of all the things that you need. If your group wants to commune with the forest or spend some time at the seashore, Is there a spot that you're likely to have for yourselves for a while? Do you have access to food and water? What will you do in the unlikely event of a medical emergency? It's a good idea to learn basic first aid and CPR. Have you accounted for possible weather or temperature changes? Make sure to pack and bring a bag that contains all of the supplies that you might need, including a first aid kit and what is required when nature calls. So extra tissues, hand sanitizer, toilet paper. Some good things to bring with you might be non-messy art supplies, the appropriate number of blindfolds, which are comfortable and inexpensive eye coverings, noise-canceling earphones in case somebody wants to get away from external distractions while still remaining in the general group environment. If you are comfortable with taking charge of the substances that are to be ingested, then you should probably do so. It's much easier if there's if you want more, it's here, right? And not everybody having things in pockets and then people losing things and then people not knowing when they're taking things. And so if it's going to be a planned group experience, all the substances go in one place. When I trip sit, I don't supply any substances for anyone, nor do I serve them, but I will have a bowl of MDMA capsules sitting usually next to my altar, and I will sit here and answer any questions about it if anybody wants to answer any questions. But I don't distribute drugs because that's illegal. But if there is a bowl of drugs there and people are consensually taking them, and I'm making sure that they're not taking more than one at a time, those things can be quite helpful in these environments. Make sure that everything, including probable boosters, if you're going to be taking more later, are weighed out in advance and properly labeled, right? You can have one bottle, which is the initial dose, and another bottle that's labeled boosters, and that can be then put out when the time calls. If music is desired, you should familiarize yourself with the in-house sound system and be the person who is the DJ. Musical tastes can vary widely, both between and within small groups of explorers, and you should encourage them to populate the playlist with whatever appeals to their unique sensibilities. So creating a shared Spotify list and then distributing it and being hey, everybody, put in your favorite songs and we'll make a communal playlist, and then everybody can have that playlist after the experience, is a great way to create cohesion. So one method for accommodating a diversity of tastes is to let everyone contribute to a curated playlist beforehand that is roughly as long as the projected duration of the experience, including setup divided by number of participants. You could set it to shuffle, you could simply allow synchronicity to work. It's magic. Copies of the entire collection organized in the order that it happened to play are easily dubbed off onto thumb drives. They make terrific souvenirs. Spotify now has shared playlists. So, setting the space, setting the setting, and creating a comfy space. Plan to have everyone show up at least an hour in advance with the intended start time, so everyone can settle in, everybody can shift their energy, we're not fighting traffic, we're not running late, so have people come an hour or two before. Start the music shortly after the last person arrives. A little anticipatory tension is natural, and you can help make things easier by creating a celebratory vibe and projecting an air of gentle enthusiasm about the upcoming expedition. I am super excited that we're all here together. It's gonna be a great adventure. I'm stoked about it. Enthusiasm is a terrific word as it has the same root as entheogen, which is something like manifestation of the divine. It is the polar opposite of anxiety, and it is at least very contagious. So if one person is enthusiastic, it gives people permission to also be enthusiastic and excited about it. Celebration is also a wonderful word. It doesn't just mean party. It can also indicate a solemn ritual or observance that is being mindfully performed in a positive spirit. Like, for instance, when a priest celebrates Mass, right? So enthusiasm, celebration, these are all facilitator. These are all good things that have root words with like other positive energy around them. Use the time while folks are acclimatizing and get into resonance to make sure that the setting is especially safe, tidy, comfortably, and aesthetically satisfying. Consider smudging the space with a little sage or Palo Santo if that isn't too woo for you. And for your collective taste, and clean up any unsightly messes. Your charges should not be forced to confront a sink full of dirty dishes or an overflowing trash can while they are high, when such matters are so easily remedied before the celebration begins. Look around and make sure that the environment is reasonably child-proofed as well. Bob Jesse actually uses the term poison-proof, which is if people are coming into your space and they're going to be getting altered, like, it's totally cool to like take the knife block and like put it in a closet someplace, right? Some people are like, oh, I want an apple, and they'll grab a knife and slice their hand. It's not that they're actively suicidal or engaging in self-harm. It's just a thing that people can take an act, like have an accident around. And so you don't have to go nuts and disconnect the stove or anything. It's mostly just like common sense stuff, like relocating any piles of rusty knives that happen to grab your attention, or locking a door that leads to a high unfinished balcony. Invite your friends to bring some cozy stuff from home that makes them happy to assist you in the decoration effort. Consider appointing a little altar on which other people can place a few things from home that are especially meaningful to them, or may remind them of their particular intentions for a session. You can never have too many pillows in any house. And colorful sarongs and tapestries can quickly transform a room that is usually dominated by a television into a luxurious psychedelic temple. It can be nice to set up a designated quiet room if somebody needs an isolation space. I have a whole bunch of tie-dyed silk scarves that I use to cover any sharp light bulbs, right? It softens the light. Every time I'm in a hotel room, I cover all of the horrible lighting. And so being able to change the lighting, my whole house has like hue light bulbs, so I can like on my phone change all of the colors of everything in my house at all times. And being able to add blankets, have fans, like hot, cold, like, right, everybody has different body temperature relationships around the environment. It feels nice and cool in here. So while you're setting up, casually check in with each person to address any concerns they may have, and just to make sure that they seem to be at ease and looking forward to the upcoming experience. When the hour draws near, gather the tribe and go over your agreements, and then consume the first round of substances. I do a lot of work with like event producers around the relationship between food and substance use. And if you are hosting a party and your main objective is to get high with your friends, then you need a whole bunch of bite-sized snacks, and you like don't need a sushi bar. We had a party that for New Year's last year that was down in Mexico that I couldn't attend, but I sent people in my stead. And the party planner, who is mostly a wedding party planner, was like, we're gonna do a 10:30 p.m. sushi and oyster bar on the night when everyone was planning on taking MDMA. And I was like, that is a big waste of money. Like, no one's going to eat that, right? Like, I am a big fan of midnight soup and chai, right? People get hungry once the drugs start to wear off. I like making a big thing of like vegan soup, maybe like a vegan miso, or like a butternut squash, like a blended, something that's like you don't have to chew, so chunks don't get in your mouth. You want everything to kind of, right? That with like a fresh thing of sourdough at 2 in the morning because you're so hungry, but you want like warm sustenance, but you also are like, I don't know if I can eat anything, but like a bowl of warm soup with some like fresh bread dipped in it satisfies almost all of the trippers. So making sure, like, are there off limits areas? You can tell people hey guys, don't go upstairs. Hey guys, don't go into my bedroom. Like, if you're in a space, also, if you're like, don't use the hot tub. I know 2 people who have died in psychedelic-related hot tub accidents. And so, making sure that people know the ground rules. Hot tub is for sunrise. Hot tub is not for when you're high. It's for after you're high. And so, preparing snacks. The other thing I love to do is fruit mandalas. Right? I like slicing all different rainbow colors of fruits and then arranging them on a platter in like a beautiful mandala way. And then like, here's a snack for you guys. And everybody's like, oh, this is like beautiful. It has geometric shapes in it. And it's like all of the colors.
Yeah.
We do it for 5-MeO ceremonies sometimes. And when they come out of it, it's like, no, I'll feed you. Like, what do you want? And it's like, I want pineapple. I always want pineapple. Some people put a piece of cold pineapple in your mouth, like as you're like finished with your experience, and it's just like cold and juicy and delicious and like.
I want a trip at your house. This is like so taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, backgrounds in hospitality. So I did high-end hospitality before I became a social worker, and so it's like the perfect merge of how do we make people feel comfortable? How do we make the environment feel luxurious? And you can do that with like these little poofs, like fuzzy poof things. Getting some like beautiful tapestries and silks and like things to hold on to and squeeze and yeah. But people show up at my house and they're like, this is a great place to get high. I mean, it's because I want to get high in my own house. It's so rare that I'm out in which I can engage in psychedelic practice, because I'm usually at parties and I'm the sober one, and so I try to make my home my temple. So having an opening ceremony, setting intentions and agreements. Like, this doesn't have to be a heavy thing. You just encourage everyone to get together and share their intentions. Sometimes people want to share a little poem or something that inspires them. Maybe propose a toast, right? And then it's down the hatch and you're on your road to your big adventure. So, doing the thing, like trip sitting. It's fairly easy. So the come up is an important part of the trip. Encourage people to get comfortable in their bodies by moving around, stretching, doing yoga, or simply dancing to the music. Some people might just want to sit and meditate, and that's of course okay also. Put some light, healthy snacks out and relax. Once the effects start to kick in, your job is mostly to be a helpful and friendly observer. If you're already good friends with the participants, you should feel free to get in there and play with them, of course. And even if you're virtual strangers, you should always be a warm, friendly presence who is willing to engage in any reasonable activity that you're invited to join in. Hey, do you want to do some art with me? Hey, do you want to like what are we playing with? Like, let's hit the dance floor. Let's, like move around. Do you want to go for a walk around the property? So your job is to like be a helpful, friendly presence that is easy to talk to. Sometimes the attention of a sober person can make people who are altered feel a little self-conscious. Or you may just kind of stick out because you're like outside of the group dynamic that's unfolding. And so additionally, friends who have intentions that include having a group bonding experience might really want to focus on interacting with one another, and you should be mindful and not insert yourself in their shenanigans unless you're sure that you're welcome. And so sometimes, like, right, if people are like hanging out on the couch over here and like they're in it, I'm not gonna go in and be like, hey guys, like what's going on over here? Like, it's weird. But I'll, huh?
Do you feel it now?
Right? You guys high right now? Like, but also I will sit there, and what I will do, hospitality like minded, is be like, oh hey guys, like how are you doing? Like, let me clear out some of the glasses for you. You guys want me to get you any water? oh yeah, we're super thirsty, so I'll come in and I'll refill water. Like, if somebody's getting really emotional, whether it's crying from joy or crying from grief, I will for sure grab a box of tissues and just like slide it over. But like, I'm not gonna get involved in it. I'm not there to be somebody's therapist. And so it's a profound honor to be invited to help in other people's most powerful, transformational, and intimate experiences. You should be able to joyfully participate in the celebration of family without becoming involved on a personal level. People in altered states can be extremely suggestible, and it's important that you set your own ego aside and allow their experiences to unfold without attempting to interpret them for them. This is not the time to share your pet theories about the nature of reality, and it is extremely inappropriate to hit on or kind of sort of barely flirt with anybody that you're facilitating for, right? Like, think of me as like a concierge or a butler, right? Like a psychedelic butler I'll clear off the table, I'll like take care of the things that need to get taken care of, but unless somebody's like, hey Panda, can I talk to you? Then I'm not gonna like insert myself into the group dynamics. You wanna just like hang out, but also be aware of timing, be aware of like if somebody's like, oh, can you help me to the bathroom? Of course. So you wanna be close enough to the people that are having the experience that if somebody like hand waves you, that you can see them, but you also don't wanna be like, how's it going over here? Like, and like hover, right? And so part of it is like that hospitality art form of like knowing like what I'm supposed to be looking for. Assuming that everything is nominal, it's your job just to keep the good vibes flowing, bring out snacks, monitor the music, and make sure that everybody's cozy. If things seem to be getting out of tune, the mood can often be shifted by gently moving everyone into a different activity, like drawing or playing with flow toys, right? So many times, I have so many people at parties be like, Panda, can you roll me a cigarette? Because they like don't have the dexterity to do it, and I'm like, yeah, of course. Or can you roll me a joint? Like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, I'll like let me get those prepped for you. Like, let me like, what are the things that you can't do while you're high that you might need somebody to help you do when they're high? And if people start getting into conflict or there's some like crunchy energy, you can suggest, hey, you guys want to go like check out the stars? Do you guys want to go? Or like, if you have the resources, like you can build a fire in like an outdoor fire pit. I'd be like, hey guys, like the fire's like roaring outside. Let's go hang out by it. Or let's go inside and then I'll also make a musical shift, right? If the music gets a little too like dark or heavy, like sometimes we need some like lightness and brevity. Sometimes somebody wants to read a poem or recite something to the group. You're in charge of turning the volume down and turning the volume back up when it's finished, but being able to create space for them. So what happens when challenges come up? So sometimes an individual may need to be taken aside for a little while if their behavior becomes incompatible with group dynamics. The facilitator's goal in this case is usually reintegration of the individual into the larger dynamic, though in some instances, it's fine for a participant to go lie down by themselves for a bit if that best suits the needs of all concerned. Make sure to take time out to check on anyone who chooses to move elsewhere, even and especially if the rest of the scene is much more fun to take part in. If they want to talk to you about something, you should listen non-judgmentally and allow them to process whatever's coming up for them. If anyone seems to be having a really rough time, engage your harm reduction training. Stay friendly and positive and try not to project too much of concern, right? Like lightness, brevity. I'll give a really good example. I was working an event in Italy, and it was very celebratory, and most people were on MDMA. And this girl comes up to me, and she was like, Panda, like, can I talk to you for a second? And I was like, yeah. I was like, do you want to talk to me like here in the corner of the party, or do you want to like step outside? Like, what kind of talk do you want to have? And she was like, let's go outside. Walk outside. Burst into like sobbing tears. And I was like, okay, let's go find a room, because we don't want to be out. It was December in Italy, so it was chilly out. And so I was like, let's go find a room. Like, we'll sit down and chat about it. And she was feeling really bad because everybody was having a good time. And she felt like she really wanted to have a good time. But she had lost a friend to suicide about 4 months prior. And that's what was coming up for her. And she was like, I don't want to cry in there and ruin everybody else's good time. And also, like, oh my God, I know that, like, my friend, like, I couldn't have done anything to prevent my friend's suicide, but it's still raw for me. And I was like, let's go cry it out. Like, that's hard. Losing a friend during COVID, it was during layoffs. She was a manager of a team. The person on her team, they had to do like massive layoffs in her department, and somebody who worked for her that they laid off committed suicide. And she was in therapy, she was doing all of the things, but like, grief is grief, and like, it's not linear, and it can come up, and it is okay to have somebody like that. That is why I get hired to go do these parties, is so all of a sudden it's not like 5 high friends taking care of the one friend who's in distress. It's like all of the friends can stay at the party, I'll take care of the one person who's in distress. And so it keeps the vibes, like the collective vibes going. And we sat there, she told me the whole story, and I was like, oh my God, that is so hard. I like see you, I hear you, you like, all of your feelings are valid. We're like having this moment, and then a friend walked through the hallway and saw us. And came in and like looked at us and was like, hey, went up to her and goes, whatever's going through you right now, absolutely fine. Like, do you want to come dance with me? She grabbed his hand and was like, back on the dance floor. And like, I didn't have to reintegrate her into the party. Like, that hump finished. And we were like sitting there at the end of the process, and it was lovely to see somebody else like pull her back in. Great. Fabulous. Like, and also so necessary, because when you're in these intense recreational environments, grief comes up, trauma comes up. It happens. So if difficulty persists, try to get the person who is affected to talk about what they are experiencing, but don't fixate on the supposed problem. It's not like, tell me everything that's going on about your grief process. It's like, it's okay for you to have a grief process. Often, an apparent crisis is short-lived and quickly forgotten if it's allowed to pass without too much analysis. If the discomfort persists, gently change the setting. Sometimes altering the lights or putting on a new track is all it takes to break the loop. Remind them that however strange things may seem at the moment, they will surely return to their normal mode of consciousness in a very, very short time from your perspective. Remember that time dilation can be quite dramatic, and 5 minutes in my world can be experienced as a compressed eternity to somebody who's really far gone. Try to encourage the anxious client to breathe consciously and to be present in their body. Sometimes it helps to reintroduce music or objects of interest associated with earlier and the more blissful parts of the trip. Massage can be very helpful, as can yoga and stretching if the client is mobile. Once in a while, there's nothing you can do but love and wait and hold space with the client and tell them how brave and hardcore they are until the situation resolves. And that's tough. Don't let the person who's struggling get down on themselves for having a hard time, because that just feeds into that cycle. We are all explorers of the last great sea, all the more beautiful and compelling for its wild storms and terrible monsters. The dangers are real and the challenges are many, and everyone who takes the plunge should be saluted, in my opinion, no matter if they sink or swim in one particular occasion. On the other hand, you get to be there when it all goes right, and more than makes up for it. It's not that often in life that you get to see another person truly flummoxed with holy awe. Always remember that it's just as important to be there for someone who breaks through as it is to be there for someone who falls in. It's your job to bear witness to the occasional divine experience, as well as to minister the occasional meltdown. maybe your client didn't have to move to the Himalayas and you eat bark and beetles for 40 years, but that doesn't mean that their revelation isn't any less relevant. Many people seem to think that legitimate spiritual insight is uniquely the result of a long, hard practice supported by a minimal lifestyle. Psychedelics are very democratic and an efficient path, but they are hardly the easy way. As many who have been run through the cosmic ringer a few times can attest, enormous courage is a prerequisite. Under the right circumstances, they can deliver the real thing though, and too often it occurs with little ceremony and no support or validation from their community. A revelatory experience can be quite shocking, and it can be lonely and alienating if there's no one there to share it with who will give it the honor it deserves. It can actually make it easier for the person to recall and integrate the experience if someone else acknowledges their attainment. Be happy for anybody who hits the bullseye, and at the same time, try to balance the inflationary ideation by reminding them of the commonality of their experience. So having a closing ceremony. So when things start to wind down, I like to wrap a session with a light meal. We already talked about it. Soup, chai, and homemade chai, all of the spices in the pot, you boil them for hours. I do it usually the day before. If clients feel able to eat, even if it's just a little bit of fruit and tea, it's grounding. It makes a nice ritual celebrating the return to normal functioning parameters. This is a good time to have a little group share about what came up for each person, what they learned, and what they want to most remember. As far as follow-up goes, it's good to make yourself available in the few days following a session if anyone involved wants to talk some things over. Telling the tale a few times helps people to sort out their often overwhelmed and fragmented memory, track and massage it into all into a more or less linear story that they can then integrate more easily into their lives. If anybody's still having problems integrating the experience after a few days, it might be a good idea to refer them to a talented or sympathetic counselor in their area. As we mentioned, a ground control person is an obvious harm reduction measure. Most psychedelic disasters that I've heard of over the years could probably have been avoided or at least softened considerably if a sober and experienced friend had been on hand to keep things flowing in the right direction. Nevertheless, times being what they are, there are probably some legal risks involved, and it pays to familiarize yourself with any local statutes concerning aiding and abetting criminal activity and so forth. Always be conscious, always be careful. We hope that this has been a useful overview of a rewarding and important evocation of how to hold space for your friends. It's an honor to do it. I really absolutely think that it is one of the best. It's gonna be the way that most people experience psychedelics in America in the next 5 years. Is not going to be paying $3,000 or $15,000 or something like that. It's gonna be friends getting together in people's homes in the mountains, and going on hikes and having these experiences. And so if you're in a group of friends, take turns sitting. Take turns being the person who gets to be ground control. And then there's shared experience in that. If one person volunteers and then it's okay, well, I did it last